Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to this week's episode of The Couch Trip Therapy for Everyday Life with your therapist expert, Eddie Reece, and me, the voice of the every person, Bill Courtright. We are going to talk for the next 45 to 60 minutes about a topic that is, I think, accurately described as timely and relevant. Not a week goes by where you're not going to see a subject in either the news or podcast or interview about the subject of work-life balance. And so Eddie shot me a text this morning and he said, "Yeah, I think we want to talk about work-life balance on the podcast today." I said, "Oh, great." He's like, "Develop some talking points." And normally I would go to ChatGPT or Claude or Perplexity and I would try to get a structure. And this was a specific topic that I was like, I'm not going to do that because I have an opinion. And for those of you who are active, avid listeners, I'm 51 years old. I've got a wife, 2 boys, 2 dogs, a mother-in-law. I've got a father too, but he's out of town. But so I've got a lot going on. I own and operate a business, fairly active in the community. I volunteer. I love doing this podcast with Eddie. And there's a bunch of other things that I do for fun, travel and cook and all those things. So the subject of work-life balance is a subject that I have pondered, tried to learn about, and it's occupied, some parts of my brain for a long time. So I didn't want ChatGPT to tell me what it thought. I wanted to just share with Eddie what I'm feeling in hopes that we could have a normal conversation and maybe what I'm feeling is what you're feeling. So with that,
Probably
yeah, I would
probably
think.
is
I would think.
because most people get work-life balance really wrong.
You and I may agree on this.
Yeah,
You
but
may
my wrong is gonna be different than your wrong.
Okay.
Mm,
So, we'll start with a question towards Eddie, and then I'll, chime in. That was a pretty lengthy intro, so I've talked enough. The question I will ask Eddie is when a patient comes into your office and mentions work-life balance or creates an image in your mind where work-life balance is gonna be the subject of the conversation, what comes to mind and how do you move forward?
Gosh, a lot of things, there's one day I'll figure this out because it comes up every once in a while where I got this idea from. I think it's from physics that when you name the problem, you also name the solution. And so we could kind of start with the idea that the problem is that there is such a thing as work-life balance and you should work toward that. That's a big part of the problem. If you think about the literal phrase work-life balance, there's work on one side of the seesaw and life on the other. And somehow it's supposed to be balanced. Well, if it were balanced, it would be equal. Nobody wants that. Okay. So obviously, you're not talking about a balance at all. Okay. So there's problem number one. Problem number two is work life. Okay. So that means if you're at work, you're not alive. And then everything else is life. That doesn't make any sense either. Okay. So you've got, I think you just throw out the term altogether. If somebody says, "Oh, I have a problem with work-life balance," what are they normally struggling with? They're normally struggling with working too much, right? You don't hear people go, "I have a problem with work-life balance." "Oh, what's the problem?" "Well, I'm not working enough." That generally doesn't come up, okay? And if it did, they don't really mean they're not working enough, they mean I don't have enough money, because how many people go, "Gosh, I wanna go work more just for the sake of working more," Nobody's ever been heard to say on their deathbed, "I should have spent more time working." Okay, so you got a problem with how you're framing the situation. So to answer your question, where I go is, okay, what are you unsatisfied about? in your life. Um, well, I'm not spending, I'm working too much. Or, I'm not spending enough time here. Okay, well, work less. That should solve it all. Okay, well, I can't. I mean, my boss is, okay, well, that could be a problem with maybe you're like a lot of my clients, you're in IT and normal work week, from best I can tell in IT is about 60 hours a week. So there's your problem. You're trying to do something impossible. You're trying to have a job that takes up 60 hours a week, and that's working. I go, what about the time you spend thinking about it? Right? That's work to me.
Right.
You're at work if you're thinking about it. So the problem is you want something impossible. You want to be able to work 60 hours a week and then have plenty of time to do all the other things you want to do. And there's simply not enough time in the day for that to happen.
Right.
Right. So that's the problem. It's not a problem of work life balance. It's a problem of you work too much and you're dissatisfied because I'm not doing this so much. And I'll tie this to the concept of burnout, which I think everybody gets wrong. There's no such thing as burnout if you're doing something you like. The only people who get burned out are people who are doing something they don't like. Okay? So the problem isn't burnout. The problem is what you're doing. You don't
Yeah.
like it. Don't do it.
Right.
Right? Find something else. So it's the same thing with this work life thing. How are you going to earn a living spending less time at work? And for a lot of folks, that's a really difficult challenge.
Yeah.
There's, IT. I mentioned I was in the restaurant business for a while. You work a lot of hours and you work some crazy hours. It's hard to just not work an
Right.
awful lot. And you're generally, if you're in something like the restaurant business, service industry, you're not making an awful lot of money. So you need to work more.
Right.
Folks that, you know, you hear about folks that are really struggling financially and they're working 3 jobs, so you can go a lot of different directions because that person that's working 3 jobs, there's no such thing as work-life balance for them. How are they gonna correct that? A lot of it, they're not going to be able to correct. They don't have the training, education, wherewithal to work in a job to make enough money to raise a couple of kids. So the problem a big part of the problem is the system that doesn't pay people enough and doesn't value these particular kinds of workers enough and doesn't educate people enough. And so the point that I wanted to kind of bring out in this conversation is things in our lives are just not that simple. Oh, I'll get a work life balance. No, no, you probably won't. And there will be times when you're going to work more than you want to, which means you're going to do things you don't want to do more than you want to. Because if
Right.
you love your job, you don't go, "Oh, I'm working way too much."
Right.
You're just, all excited about what you're doing. So there's a quick kind of poking at the idea of what people are after. They're not after work-life balance. That's not it at all. They're saying, "I'm not living the life I want to live." That's
Bingo.
what they're saying.
Yeah.
And so help me with that.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think when people address or use the term work-life balance, what they're really saying, and you touched on it, which is there's a general dissatisfaction with how their life is
Mhm.
being put together or executed. And having not heard your view on this, I had an opinion, and I'll share it, which is, I challenge work-life balance as a concept because I just I've chosen to believe that you have life and work is a part of it.
Mhm.
And if you're happy with your life, and I don't even know if balance makes sense. Balance, to your
No,
point, assumes that there's a
I
50-50 split.
really rail against the word balance.
Right,
It's because that first of all, that would mean that there is somewhere a chart that says this is the proper balance.
right,
This much of this and this much of this and this much of that, and there's no such thing.
right. And for the couples that, or one half of the couple or both halves of a couple who come in to see you, my assumption would be that there's things that aren't perfect in their view, and they're looking for help. And I can imagine, as we look at my specific situation, and I choose to look at life as life, and work is a very important part of my life, and it fulfills me, and it's not just income, it's drive, it's love, it's passion, it's purpose, it's a lot of things. Um, and there are times when I'm working, and there are times when I'm with my family,
Mhm.
and I don't know that they'll ever be balanced, to your point. But what
Right.
I do think is something that I've strived for, or at least tried to figure out, is, how do I be present in the activity that I'm currently engaged? How am I at work when I'm working? How am I
Mhm.
with my wife when I'm with my wife? How am I with my boys when I'm with my
Yeah.
sons? How am I, you know what I mean? So
Right,
it's like,
you're trying to put 100% into whatever you're doing, and that is a huge key to anybody that's struggling with work-life balance. You go, "Oh, work-life balance, I gotta get that." And again, you're doing things you don't wanna do, you're doing too much of things that, you're not that thrilled about, which means you're not wanting to be 100% present.
right.
Because this feels like toil, this is no fun, whatever. And so here's one of those things that seems simple, but there's a lot to it. You have things to do, and some of those things I call chores. These are chores, and you're going to call something a chore because you're not that excited about doing it. Okay, how can you do a chore and enjoy it? Well, you might not. What you can do is be 100% present in that. So when you clean up something or fold the laundry or sweep the floors or whatever it is that you go, man, this is not a lot of fun. How can I be fully present with this? And when you can do that fairly well, you don't have to do it perfectly. What you're really doing is you're stopping the rebellion and argument in your mind
Mhm.
that says, "Oh, this is such a chore." You're beating thing yourself up. You're doing this, and you're mad about it, and you're complaining. That tells your nervous system that things are not going well. And then you're gonna rebel against that, "Well, like, we gotta get it done," "Ah, I don't wanna do it," and so you're stressing your system by being that way, whereas if you pay attention and you're 100% into it, and I mean, this happens to me countless of times when I do that, whatever it is I'm doing, all of a sudden doesn't feel like a chore, it's just washing the dishes, and then it ends sooner than it would have ended in my mind. The amount of time is probably the same as if I were nagging about it, and bitching about it. Yeah, I don't wanna do it, that just makes it feel longer, even if the amount of time is exactly the same. So being present is a real key to taking care of a lot of these things, because the payoff for being present isn't being present. The payoff is that you stop the fighting, and you don't stress the system.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you an example of where the fighting can actually be pretty pretty impactful. And it's a little bit of a pivot from your work being a chore and a toil and something you don't want to do. I'll give you an example. So early on in my marriage, right when Cole was born, so our first was born, there was a transition in our family, or at least in the mind and heart of my wife, when she became a mother, and I was obviously a husband, but I was building a business at the very same time. And so there was we would do things and I would be doing this.
Mhm.
And there was a at first it was kind of like, are you working? And I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm here. No, no, it's great. Let's
Mhm.
go to the birthday party. Let's go to the park. We'll go to the beach, whatever. And
Mhm.
but you're like, and I've been guilty of this on our podcast. My watch buzzes, or I get a notification, and I got ADD like crazy. So you talk about presence and you talk about fighting. Well, what surfaced for me when we talk about the term, which neither of us subscribe to, but we'll call work-life balance, was I was kind of never where I was.
Right.
So, I was on my phone a lot. I was answering calls when I didn't want to. I was doing emails. I was doing
Mhm.
things. And from my wife's perspective, it was disrespectful. And it was like,
Well, from any rational, reasonable human being's perspective, you're being disrespectful.
agreed, guilty. So, because I cared very much for my wife and I cared very much for my brand new first and only son,
And your time looking at a screen.
but it was almost there was an awareness challenge. Like I was kind of like
There's a
it had to be.
how about this? There's a caring challenge.
Well, we're talking past tense now. We're going 10 years
Okay,
ago.
okay,
I think I'm better now.
let's talk about it in present tense, because you're doing what an awful lot of people do, and I call it making yourself out to be the good guy. And so you bristle against caring about looking at a screen. We do what we care about, right? And if you paid attention to your wife fully, then you would say, well, I'm caring about my wife. You split your time. You say, well, I don't care about the screen time, but you do because you're doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course.
So go ahead and call it what it is. I care about this, which makes it disrespectful, because now your caring is being split at the moment where it should be fully here.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with you caring about looking at your screen for whatever reason. Again, what we're doing overall, an overall way to think about this, is you're reducing conflict, neurological conflict. And when you reduce neurological conflict, your ability to do whatever you're doing increases. Right? There's a gal who, what is Debbie? Debbie, she may be a neurologist. I can't remember what she is, but she's at the University of Arizona. Debbie Cruz. Look her up if you're interested in this sort of stuff. And she took what she does and applied it to golf, and did functional MRIs, which means we can see what's firing in your brain as you do something. And she had golfers attempt to make putts while she was getting a functional MRI. And what she found was the problem was that there was a conflict. Different parts of the brain were lighting up. So one part's thinking one part's thinking another, one part's thinking another, and we all do this to ourselves all the time. What am I doing? I'm going to do this. Yeah, but I got that to do, and I got this to do, and I got that to do. That's a neurological kind of conflict. You're going in a lot of different directions. You're the guy who got on his horse and rode off in all directions. So what you want to do is reduce the conflict, and the way you do that is exactly what we're saying. It's a focus on one thing. One thing. So if you're going to talk to your wife, you're talking to your wife. If you want to switch over to your phone, this has to go away, and now you're doing this. Okay? That way, your brain is not fighting with itself over where you're supposed to be, which is what most people struggle with in one way or another. And if you're diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, that's really the thing. I'll throw this in about ADD. It's not a problem with being able to focus. Because if you got ADD, man, you will lock into something and nothing else exists. I heard Trevor Noah say ADD, if you have ADD, there's two kinds of time. There's right now, and then what was it? Right now, and then everything else. So there's only right now, So you can get focus, but your focus is split. And if it's split, it's a conflict. If it's a conflict, that's stressful. If it's stressful, you go, oh, I got a problem. And then you go, the problem is work-life balance. I heard about that. Well, now you're headed down a road that's not going to help you.
Do you think it's a good idea to address the root cause of the challenge, or to eliminate the input? Like,
well, there's not a root cause. That's my whole point.
So if I just leave my phone in the car, is that satisfactory?
No, because you're going to be doing this to your car or towards your phone.
No, maybe not.
Yes, you will. Okay. You just will.
Can I tell you a story?
If you're really good at, I'm going to pay attention to you, honey. Okay.
Well, that's why I asked. Yeah.
Your phone could be right there and you wouldn't even know where it was. Think
Right.
about,
well, that's why I asked if it's
when you first
appropriate to
fall
do
in
that.
love. Okay. You first fell in love with your wife and you're sitting with her. You're gazing at her. Right. You don't notice anything else, and you're 100% there, right? One of the things I do with couples when they come in is I have them gaze at each other. And I've done it hundreds of times. It goes exactly the same way every time, although I did have one couple who did it comfortably. The first thing that will always happen is the couple gets uncomfortable. I go, it's not a staring contest. I want you to look at each other and gaze at each other. They're going to laugh. They're going to look away. They're going to say something. I go, no, be quiet. Just gaze at each other. And while they're attempting to do that, I'll go, this is what you did when you first met and you really were enamored. You gazed at each other. You don't do that anymore. So you don't pay 100% attention unless you're in a fight. And then it's, I'm locked onto you, lady, and we're going down. Okay?
Mhm.
So you want that ability to have, and I think Debbie uses this, a relaxed focus. Right? So if you want to focus on something, it needs to be relaxed, which means it needs to not have conflict. which means you don't want your attention going in several different directions at once. You learn to do that, then you're not even going to think about work-life balance, really. You might struggle with that thing of getting locked onto something longer than you need to because you've got something else to do or somebody waiting on you or whatever. But that still takes focus. You get locked on because you lose your focus. You're not conscious of where you are. You, a relaxed focus is a consciousness.
Yeah. So bringing this back to feather this back to work life, or life or work, being where your feet are, being present. We could get into the how the work. Well, we went there. Work life from a therapist perspective, I would imagine it's typically not one person saying, "I wish I worked less. I wish I had more time." It's typically a relationship situation, like it was for me, where I was being essentially, I don't say corrected, but it was being brought to my attention consistently that this is a behavior I don't like. Like this is you like
Mhm.
we got to figure this out. And then I mentioned to you like is it if we remove the stimuli, does that count? And you brought up a good point. Like listen, if you're really respectful and you're really caring and you're really doing what you're focusing, it shouldn't matter if the phone's there, and that makes sense. But recently, my family and I traveled, and we
Mhm.
traveled to Europe. We're in France. My wife has family in Paris. We went to Paris. It was wonderful. And since my wife is incredibly frugal and, we have 3 cell phones between my wife, myself, and our oldest son, she made the decision, well, there's no point in paying, the 10 or 12 bucks a day. We don't need everybody's phone on. We're fine if we're on Wi-Fi. I'll have the cellular capability. So if we need an Uber or if we need to call or text someone out, everyone else, you just stay on Wi-Fi. So I'm like, great. I never had to take my phone anywhere. I
Mhm.
left it in the home. And so did Cole. And so I was walking through Paris and it was so liberating and it was
Mhm.
free and it was like
Mhm.
I could look at all the sights and I was watching my son's reaction to this beautiful historic architecture and I was watching Danielle, doing her thing and it was like it didn't take long. I'm like first day, I was like this is awesome. Like
Mhm.
I don't know that I ever want to bring a phone on vacation again. And of course, it wasn't my idea. I can't take credit
Right.
for it. And
Right.
it's kinda has like almost like a lap band gastric bypass type thing, like, "Yeah, you couldn't lose weight, but maybe if we tied your
Mhm.
stomach in half, you might
Oh,
not
yeah.
eat as much and you'll lose weight." Or it's like, "Hey, you have a Coke problem. We can't get you off the blow, but we'll super glue your nose together and see if that works."
Mhm.
But regardless, it was an
Yeah.
amazing experience.
Yeah, because we just don't realize how much time we spend on devices. If you want a shock to your system, look at your phone, your computer, put them together, put these 2 things together, and look at measured screen time. Your phone, your computer will tell you how much time you spend and break it down on each thing and how many hours a day. And then it'll map it out a week. I don't know. I can't remember if it does a month or so. I know it does a week. And it will be a shock to your system. I've never had anybody do that, and I'll have people do that in the office or, if I'm online. And the reaction's always shock, right? And if you pay attention to things like that, pay attention to everything, which is what mindfulness is, this other buzzword is. Mindfulness is paying attention. So you don't get locked into something because you're paying attention to what you're doing while you're doing it. So there's like this separate part of you that is your paying attention part. Where am I? What am I doing now? And I'll catch myself during the day and I'm just like, okay, stop. All right, where am I? What is it I want to do? Because I'll just get so lost in all these different options that are floating around up there.
Yeah.
Um, so you're able to be much more present without that screen in front of you.
Yeah.
Um, I had a really terrific moment. I'm a huge NASA space nerd, and I finally got to see a shuttle launch. And I've got a really at the time I had a really nice camera, a nice long lens, and I'm sitting there fiddling with it just before the launch, and this guy tapped me on the shoulder, and I said, "Hey, how you doing?" He introduced himself, and he said, "Don't take any pictures," which I thought was an odd thing to say to me. And he said, "I work for NASA, and I work for the department that takes all the pictures of everything." He said, "Give me your email address, and I'll email you some pictures." He said, "You're going to enjoy it more if you just watch it,"
Yeah.
you know? And I've been a photographer for a long time. I started, taking pictures for the, college newspaper yearbook, stuff like that, um, concert stuff, sports things. And I was always aware that when I'm taking a picture, I'm not present experiencing whatever it is I'm looking at,
Yeah.
and so I knew that was part of it. So when he said that to me, it was just really very touching,
Mhm.
because of how important this thing that was about to happen was for me, and to watch it live. And so I did. I put my camera down and I watched the launch, and I was like, wow, and so I have a really good memory of that. I saw the first Artemis launch and I have a wonderful memory of doing that because I didn't even think about taking pictures. So yeah, to put your phone down, put anything down. If you want to do something that'll really kind of make you nuts, if you're eating by yourself, don't do anything but eat. Don't read anything, don't watch TV, don't look at your phone, eat and pay attention, and there's if you go to a mindfulness kind of retreat, that's what you do. You simply eat, you pay attention to eating, and you see how difficult it is to be present. We have a nervous system that likes to be active. We talk in the podcast about it's a big part of it's all about survival, and a big part of that is I've got to pay attention. We have bird feeders in the back, and birds don't eat and not look around. Right? They don't want to die. So,
Right.
but when we're eating, we're probably not going to die, right? Unless you're not paying attention and you choke on something.
Right.
Okay, so pay attention.
It's so fu it's so good.
Yeah,
It's, yeah, I mean, there's a couple spinoffs that we could do, but, we started this talking about balance, bad word, work life, probably
yeah,
misapplied.
yeah,
Life is life. Life is full of distraction. Life
yeah.
is full of, opportunity to focus. Most of us have a
Mhm.
job, a responsibility, something we do to earn, and I don't see a scenario in which that's going anywhere anytime soon. But as we kinda transition to the kinda more overarching thing, I sense us going into more this again, be where your feet are, and, focus on when you're at work, be at work. When you're not at work, don't be at work. There's only so much we can do to limit the amount of work we can do. But
Mhm.
even if you were working 60 hours a week and you came home and you were rested and energized and healthy and attentive, chances are nobody's complaining about the 60-hour work week. They're just more
You're
complaining
just
about the fact that
there.
when you're here, you're grabbing a scotch, you're passing out on the couch, you're not
Mhm.
talking to your kids or me.
Right.
It really becomes a more life management issue. Like, and work is
Well,
definitely a part of that.
nah, here we go. I got another management. That's
You
stress
prefer
management.
optimization.
Well, no, people, anger management. That's where my first
It's
kind
semantics.
of
You know what I'm getting at.
no, it's not semantics. It is what works and what doesn't work. You don't want to manage your life because managing puts a picture in your head because our nervous system works on pictures, not words. That's why semantics doesn't mean anything. It's the pictures you put in your head. So if I'm going to manage something, I'm picturing, herding cats, I'm picturing push this down, pull this up, move this over there. No, 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 no. That's way too much stress on the system. And you don't have to manage your life if you're living it the way you want to. Right? You're only going to hear, "Oh, I got to manage that." If there's a conflict, what's the
Fair.
conflict?
No, fair point.
Okay, the conflict is I have to manage it because it's out of control. Okay, well that's a whole nother thing. You're not in control, right? Give it up. Okay, even if you can influence something, because we all want to manage control with that, not with that.
Mhm.
Okay, that's back to the relaxed focus. I remember when I began talking about it this way in therapy, Andrew Jones was the center fielder for the Atlanta Braves. And I loved watching Andrew play. And as the pitcher goes into his windup, you could literally see him and this, you know?
Hmm.
And he actually moved before the ball left the bat. Right. Because he was so present. He knew what the pitch was going to be, what generally that pitch, when it gets hit, the way he saw it getting hit and the swing and the batter's tendencies. There's no telling what all went into his formula, but he was on the move before that bat or before the ball got too far away from that bat. He knew where the ball was going. And I can do that at times in golf when I hit a ball. If I hit it to someplace where I didn't want to hit it, somebody might say, "Oh, it looks like," and I go, "I know exactly where it is," and I'll walk right over to it. Right. So that's when you're really present, and I'm not having to manage that. Right. I'm being with it.
Huh. Yeah, I get it.
Be with, not manage.
So one of the things that is, I think, inarguable is that in 2026, the volume of potential distractions, I can only speak for
Yeah.
myself,
Oh, yeah.
can only speak for myself, is at an all-time high.
Oh,
And the
okay.
expectation of availability is also at an all-time high.
Mhm.
Harken back to, you know, one phone in the house bolted to the wall in the kitchen. Yeah, we had a long ass cord and
Mhm.
we got the swivel thing on the end and you could take it into
Yeah.
the bathroom if you had to. But for the most part, even before an answer machine, if the phone rang, nobody answered it. You could go over to the house, you could walk around the neighborhood looking for you, but that's it. That's all there was. We'll
Mhm.
see each other at school. We'll see each other at the
Right.
playground. We'll see each other at the park, the baseball fields, whatever. And yet everybody survived. And now it's like, you got read
Mhm.
receipts on text, you got text messaging, you got direct messaging, you got email, text, phone call, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. Now, there's this expectation that I need instant gratification. I need your response right now.
Mhm.
Having gone a week overseas without a phone, now I'm thinking, how long could I go with my phone on my desk? What would happen? What would happen if it
Oh,
took an hour and a half to get back to somebody?
right. And again, how you frame the problem is going to frame the solution. So you have to look at a piece, because there's not a problem to solve here. You have to look at a piece of the situation that you can alter that will make a difference. Right. So first and foremost, pretty much always, the first step's going to be awareness. If you want to look at your phone less, you have to realize you're actually looking at it, which sounds silly, but most of us could not tell you I pick up my phone X number of times a day
Yeah, it's
because you're
involved.
not paying attention. Most of us cannot say I look at my phone for X amount of time because we're not paying attention.
That's why the screen time notification or messaging is so impactful.
Yeah,
It's like, what?
right. And so to say if your response, a notification pops up on your phone and your standard response is to pick it up and look at it, you have to retrain your nervous system. This is like anything we talked about changing. You would want as many notifications as possible to come at you so that you could not pick your phone up. That's the only way you're going to retrain yourself is to just
As
not
I do
pick it
for
up. And then you're going to notice yourself getting anxious because okay, now there's a conflict. So reduce the conflict by all the stuff we've talked about countless times, your nervous system regulation, and learn to relax. I tell the story of becoming aware of my OCD when I walked into my apartment, the first apartment I lived in by myself. And when I walked into the kitchen. The kitchen was kind of attached to the living room there. And it just hit me for whatever reason that everything in that kitchen was exactly in the same place it was when I left, which must have had something to do with living with somebody before, that things would be in different places. And for some reason, it hit me that that wasn't good. Right? I don't know why, and this is long before therapy. So I started then, and I still do this today in different ways of moving things around, putting things into doing things differently to not have the exact same thing and it not being a problem. If you looked at my desk right now, there's all kinds of stuff sitting here that at that time in my life, if I saw what I see when I look at my desk, it would have freaked me out.
it.
So you can retrain your nervous system that that notification does not mean pick up the phone. It just means there's a notification on your phone. Okay. And if you really wanted to do a deep dive into this would be interesting research. How many notifications on someone's phone are urgent? What percentage? Okay, and it's
How many are even
probably
important?
right. Well, I mean, yeah, even matters. How many are you just going to delete?
No.
Okay. So you can retrain yourself to go, that does not mean okay, it's my phone lit up, you know,
But you
and
could
you're
do all
back.
kinds of things to now you could almost go notification off, like,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
I know.
that's one of the main things I do is no, do not notify me that whatever silly something is. I don't know. I don't care.
Yeah.
You know, I don't.
Apple will ask me now, like, "Hey, do you wanna have the focus feature enabled when you're at
Right.
home, when you're at work, when you're there, whatever?" And, when I first saw it, I was like, "Well, I don't even know what that is." And then I started looking into it more, and I'm like, "Oh, that might not be a bad thing." And then I thought, "Well, yeah." So I set up my profiles or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
for sleep and,
Right.
for me personally, I love the fact that, my phone basically goes off at 9 p.m. and comes back alive at
Mm-hmm.
7 in the morning. That works for me. Like that's an easy fix.
Yeah.
And that's made a big difference. I don't know. And my wife's phone will still be pinging at 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, you can
Oh.
stop that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. She would have to go in the other room. Yeah,
Well, she's asleep.
I don't. Yeah, but I know that's what I'm saying.
Bing, bada,
She's got to go sleep in the other room. If you can't turn your phone off,
well, I'll
you
sometimes
know.
go walk around the bed and silence it, and she'll be like,
Yeah, guys, there's mountains of research about the sleep quality when your phone is like not even in the same room and
"Yeah,
off.
that's right."
When your phone is okay, it's in the same room, but it will notify you. And then I came across one last week that just horrified me. Is people sleeping with their phones? Their phones are actually they're cradling their phone while they're asleep.
Yeah,
That just made me want to go, "Oh my god, I am so old." You know, no.
so
Don't sleep with your phone.
no. So I think we're as we get to the last 20 or so minutes, I want, we had a little bit of a back and forth. The episode started talking about work-life balance. We discussed that.
Mhm.
We talked about being where your feet are. We talked about living your life and dealing with care and presence and focus and distraction and that sort of thing. So let's give the listeners in the audience a little bit of practical advice. So as
Mm.
we talk about life
Mhm.
and we'll use the example of right now we have two examples. We have one example where an individual comes to see you and they're challenged because let's just use the example that they're not terribly fond of the work they're doing. They're
Right.
doing more of it than they want to do, and it's affecting their quality of life. And then there's a second half of that, which is like, oh, me, for example, love my work, love what I'm doing. However, the love that I have for my work does affect my personal life, and I need to create boundaries and respect those boundaries and be where my
Mhm.
feet are and be with the family
Mhm.
when I'm with the family and that sort of thing. So
Mhm.
those are two examples where work can affect life. One, I hate my work. It's killing my life. I don't like it. One, I love my work, but in order to have a life
Mhm.
with others in it, I need to be able to handle and deal with that. So let's just talk about like those two scenarios.
Right.
Some practical advice that we could give someone who's listening to this saying,
Gosh.
God, I hate my
Um,
job.
I wonder they used to have this probably can't hear me that well now. I don't know if it's over here. It would be oh yeah, here it is. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna show you this. See if you can
Yeah, it's good.
see this.
Pie of life.
The pie of life. I developed this idea back in the early days.
We held that up for
Um,
3.14 seconds.
well, do you need it longer?
No, I was making a
No.
joke.
It is. Yeah, you take a look at that. This is
The 3.14 seconds went over your head.
oh, it did? Okay. Uh, I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Math.
But
What is pi?
anyway,
3.14.
anyway, the one of the first jobs I had as a counselor type person was working for Gwinnett, Rockdale, and Newton County here in Georgia, dealing with folks who had DUIs. And I had two groups. One group was their first DUI, and that was a whole different group than the second one, which is I've had my second DUI. But to not get into the stories too much of that, I developed this idea of the pie of life to help them with what was going on. And so what I did was I told them I wanted them to chart their day-to-day life. So if you go to the bathroom, how long were you in the bathroom? If you were eating, how long were you eating? Sleeping, how long were you eating? You were sleeping. And I still do this with clients. I'll say, put together, chart all that, and here's his spreadsheet. Let's see, get that camera, typical spreadsheet, how he broke it down into categories. This is the only guy that actually did it. Out of the hundreds I suggested you do this, this guy actually did it. And so that's why I kept it. His categories are exercise, shower, getting dressed, watch TV, internet, time with friends, watching movies, sleeping, driving, church, reading, errands, eating, work, dentist, doctor, therapy, teacher recruiting fair. Okay? If you do this, it's going to be the same thing as looking at your screen time. It's going to shock you. Okay. And if you have a work life balance issue, you'll see what it is. When I did it with the folks who had DUIs, they'd bring it in the next week. And they had to, or else they'd go to jail, which was great. I loved having that much control over them. So they'd bring it in the next week, and I say, okay, put that aside. I want you to write down the top 5 things that matter to you. And I'm not talking about things like paying off your credit cards. I'm talking about deathbed matter.
Mhm.
What is it that you really wanted to be doing from your deathbed, and what really matters? So they would write that up. I'd say, okay, I want you to take your pie of life here, look at that, look at those, look at what has the most, what has the next most, we're going to go down fit. So you wind up with percentages in each one of these pies or the slices of the pies. Here's what would happen every single time. Number 1 priority, not even on the pie, right? Or a tiny sliver that wouldn't even show up. Number 2 priority, same thing. We might have to get to the 4th or 5th before it was even anything that got anything, okay? What's the most important thing in your life, okay? Nobody's gonna say sleep, right? That's the biggest chunk of most people's pie, okay? And you could go down the list, and what we would find out is the things that are really important, barely on the pie chart. Things you don't give a crap about, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the pie chart. Right? And then I would say, now maybe you have some sort of idea of why you might be drinking to excess. You're simply not doing the things you want to do. And you're doing way too much of the things you don't care about.
Right.
Okay?
Awareness precedes progress. The first thing you
Right.
ask them to do is take an inventory.
Take an inventory. Yeah. So look at that spreadsheet. Okay. And what are the percentage of those things? You want work life balance? You want a good life? You want to die with no regrets? Any of those things you might frame in a certain way. It will come back to your pie. Top priority needs a large slice of the pie. It's not going to get the slice of sleep, maybe not even the slice of work, okay? But it has to have a large chunk of the pie. The second highest priority needs a large chunk of the pie. The third priority needs a large chunk of the pie, and so on. If you can get your pie slices in the order you want them, you're not gonna be thinking about work-life balance,
Right.
okay? Um, and your pie would look different than my pie and would look different from his or her pie, right? So this and again, back to I want you to see how, you know, not so much complicated, but complex something like the problem of work-life balance actually is, and how much it's going to take for you to get your priorities laid out and then work those priorities into your day-to-day life. Right? That's how you get work-life balance. I do the things I wanna do. I minimize the things I don't wanna do. I don't wanna cut the grass, so I pay somebody to cut the grass, right? And I have that luxury, right? I know a lot of people don't, so they gotta get out there and cut the grass, but I was talking to a client a couple of days ago who loves cutting the grass, right? And so, that would be on her pie chart somewhere. I like going and working in the yard, that would be on my pie chart. You know, time on the golf course, of course, that's going to be a big chunk of my pie. Time with my wife, time by myself, doing what I want to do, the way I want to do it, and how I want to do it, and take as long as I want to do it. Right? I like that. Okay. Um, so this is the practical part of it. And with almost anything anybody brings me, I will, in some way, shape, or form, tell them to chart it.
Yeah.
You know, chart it. Especially things like exercise. That's easily chartable. How much? How long? How often? And get that chart where you can see it. Money is huge, and I was kind of I may have been one of the first therapists in the country that ever talked about money from a psychological point of view. You got to chart it. And unless this is just something that you have always done, the paying attention to your money and charting it and mapping it out, working with a budget and doing those things, I guarantee you have no earthly idea how much money you really make and how much money you really spend and what you spend it on. I guarantee you don't have a clue. Because people will bring their budgets in, and 9.5 times out of 10, their budget is less than their paycheck, and they're $100,000 in debt. And I go, that's not possible. Okay? So you got to go find the other things you're spending money on.
Yeah.
Right? They don't even realize they're doing it.
That's brilliant. We're coming up on an hour, and this was a really good conversation. It was fun. But there's that last 10 minutes, we're going to break off into some social content because that is absolutely brilliant. The data analyst in me loves where you went because I believe what gets measured improves and what gets rewarded repeats. And, no one cares about what I'm charting, but 2026, I knew I wasn't happy with my weight, my health, my energy. And so I decided I was going to set a goal for somewhere in 2026, and I chose June 1st. And I knew how much I could realistically lose weight wise, and I knew the type of exercise that would be required. And I charted it. I charted January 1, February 1, March, April, May, and then each week in between, weigh myself on Monday, not every day, but I had a monthly goal. I knew where I could be February 1st, March 1st, realistically. And then I basically tried to hit those monthly goals. And if you hit 6 monthly goals in a row, you're going to be 170 by June 1st. And, but I weigh myself every Monday. I track my cardio. I track my calories. I track my, if you burn more calories than you eat, folks, I promise you, you will lose weight.
Yeah, weight loss is the same as money.
Yeah, any
Spend
metric.
less than you make. I mean,
That's right.
this is not rocket science. But if you're not charting it, you don't know if you're actually doing what you would tell everybody to do.
Right. It's awareness.
So yeah, you've got to chart it. And again, I would caution you with the way you're defining the problem, and which defines your goal, which is the number on the scale. Okay. That's not the issue. The issue is your lifestyle, how you live your life. People who don't struggle with their weight take the stairs. Okay. People who struggle with their weight take the elevator. I mean, especially if it's one floor. Okay. Because that's a lifestyle thing. People who are overweight eat more than they need. People who aren't overweight don't eat more than they need. It's simple. But the complexity of your neurological system that causes you to do what you say you don't want to do, that's where you got to put the focus. So you will more than likely succeed at your goal, Billy. The real kind of rubber meets the road is after you've met your goal. Because the things you do to meet your goal have to be things that you want to do. If there's anything in there that you don't want to do, you're going to stop doing it as soon as you meet your goal.
Sure.
Okay. So it has to be living differently. And this applies to each and every change you want to make in your life. It has to be a part of your lifestyle, who you are, not what you do. I don't do this to lose weight. I am this. And that's why my weight is what it is. Right? Whether you're overweight, underweight, the way you want to be, it doesn't matter. I am this because that's who I am, not so much what I do or don't do. And I think that's a really important distinction.
I think that's brilliant advice. If you want to be someone who has a meaningful, fulfilling life that feels good, and you are where your feet are, there's also a level of intention and, again, identity surrounding that. So we can get into that if we go into part 2. But a lot of great nuggets in this episode, folks. There's a lot. I love that pie of life. We'll definitely have that
Oh, yeah.
as a resource. But ladies and gentlemen, this has been 60 minutes on life, work life, dare I say balance, awareness, charting, recording, measuring, understanding, care, respect, and all the things that Eddie preaches on a day-to-day basis. So I think at the end of the day, this has been another very congruent and value-minded couch trip episode. And I'm pertaining to Eddie's values and philosophy. So this has been a good one. Eddie, any final words as we wrap?
No, that if you're going to make a pie, make it a good one.
That's right. Cut me a slice the size of my sleep. There you go. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. This has been another episode, if you're reading the blogs, of podcast Therapy for Everyday Life. And that's Eddie Reece, and I'm Billy Courtright, and we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Billy. See you, folks.